Welcome to the Lovecars on the Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff, Needell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars on the Grid, your global motorsport podcast roundup. There's a bit to talk about this weekend. Tiff says I don't get enthusiastic at the beginning when there's not Formula One, but that's untrue. But there is quite a lot to talk about in terms of motorsport around the world. What have we got, Tiff? We've got NASCAR, we got Aussie action down under.
Yeah, that was all controversial stuff. You'll enjoy that when I give you some sneaky people that are getting disqualified for cheating. We'll come to that later. Of course, the Sebring, the prologue for the big World Championship kickoff, that was really interesting last weekend. And we got beach buggies in Saudi. We got British Rally Championship started. I think we're getting the rally people at kicks. A lot to talk about around the world, even though no major events. But yeah,
should we be in the news? Let's be a little bit somber to start off with, as we normally do if we got to pay our respects to somebody, because Saif Ben Sulayem, the son of Mohammed, tragically died in a car crash, age 29. He tried a bit of racing, head of the FIA. If you don't watch the show regularly, we talking about him quite often. But God, that's awful.
I know. I mean, he's had a terrible time with this FIA. It hasn't really gone his way, and also he's part of the UAE road safety campaign, as he's in charge of that. And so to have his son killed in a road crash, and I mean, it's just awful. I mean, I don't think he cares anything about the FIA at the moment when with that sort of tragedy happens in a family. So you really feel for him for that.
Yeah, absolutely horrific. So there's a bit of controversy from Bahrain as well.
What's the fallout, really? I mean, what are you doing? You keep on putting a finger on my screen. Will you stop pointing like that? You're putting me right off. Great big fingers coming out.
I'm looking at my notes.
Can we make that not you when it says? You single frame me at that stage. Yeah, it was interesting, and their shoulders have dropped. They're all analysing, what went wrong. And I think everyone's almost given up. They're so depressed by the Red Bull and, of course, the Aston Martin. And Lewis Hamilton was telling everybody, he told the team what he needed in the car. He's been racing for 300 years. He knows what he needs. He told them what he wanted, and they didn't make it. Even Mercedes are talking about him. The funny thing about these aerodynamic specialists, they're so convinced that their concept is right in theory. We've just got to make it work in practice, because they've still got these weird side pods, haven't they? Oops, dropped me sound myself now. They've all got these weird side pods, but say they're persevering with their concept. They still think it has to work. We've got McLaren saying they got their aero efficiency, the relationship between drag and downforce, have got it wrong again, and they're blaming the 15 millimeter rise in the skirts has upset their formula, and but they can't get an upgrade until Baku at the end of April. Alpine, I have to quote from Alpine, said they don't really know where they are at the moment due to some of the operational things that happen in a race. So they can't actually quantify whether they're good, bad or terrible at the moment.
I love the French. You could just imagine them shrugging their shoulders as well. We don't really know where we are.
The Ferrari is sort of hiding behind their single post rear wing. They're trying to forget the fact they were well beaten. And they've concentrated on why their single pillar rear wing, which probably won't make any difference at all, which of course failed in free practice. They couldn't use it in the race. It wobbled around. I was thinking, well, how can it wobble around? Apparently it's all down to they can't, the one wind tunnel, they can't simulate the weird vibrations that happen on track. So the fact you can't test anymore, you can't find things out for real. So they're all in a mess. Williams, the only team that's all up. They say they're the second best improvers after Aston Martin. So Williams are happy with their lot.
No disrespect to Williams, but it's not hard to improve from being last, is it?
No, that's cruel. It is hard to improve to go for the second best improvers. But the thing about I like about the Aston Martin thing is that they use Mercedes wind tunnel. They've had that agreement for long. They are now building their own Silverstone base. So you would have thought the Mercedes boys, someone would have been a spy in there somewhere, a camera on the wall to see what they're doing, because the use of Red Bull's side pod concept that they now use, that seems to work so well, was developed in Mercedes wind tunnel. So I quite like that. A lot of
I
things
really hope Mercedes don't run. I hope they don't run away with it. And of course, in terms of road cars, there's Red Bull. I hope they don't run away with it. And in terms of Mercedes and Aston Martin, of course, for road cars, Mercedes have the AMG engine in most Aston Martins now, so that's the tie up there, I'd say.
Lots of collaborations going on, but it's a funny one. They're all a mess basically. They're all shocked, I think. One story that apparently Aston Martin had developed some brakes that are better than anyone else's brakes, because of course Fernando famously outbraked Lewis into that very tight hairpin where nobody else can stop without locking up the tyres. So, or maybe it was just as Alonso's tyres weren't as worn out as Lewis's made the difference. Who knows, really? So anyway, shoulders dropped. Hopefully this weekend coming they'll be closer. But who knows?
In Saudi Arabia, I've got some Formula Ones. I know you love your stats, so I got some Formula One. I saw this in Autocar actually. Turning pole position into a win. It's actually quite interesting. So
no, it's
the
not.
highest
I
percentage,
don't love stats.
it is.
I was sarcastic, was it? You were sarcastic when you said.
I was being sarcastic. Yeah. There was some sarcasm there, but no surprises that Verstappen is leading from the active Formula One drivers about 76%. So 3 out of 4 times he starts on pole, he wins the race. Then Alonso second. Out of the 22 pole positions, he's had 14. But of course, that goes back to when he was a world champion, no doubt. I won't
sound
go
like
on
Crofty
with the list.
now. You're sounding just like Crofty now.
I've got a pop quiz for you. Out of the 6 active Formula One drivers that have had a pole position that have never won a race, name me one.
6 active Grand Prix drivers that have a pole position but never won a race.
Yes.
Nico
Very
Hulkenberg.
good.
Brazil.
Want to go on?
In a Williams.
Yep.
Can't give the year.
Lance Stroll, Lando Norris, Checo Perez, George Russell.
Lance Stroll hasn't won a race.
No, but he's had pole position and didn't win a race. That's my quiz.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And Magnussen as well. I like that stat.
Well, it's quite a lot.
Moving on.
It's quite a lot. All right. I enjoyed
swiftly.
that quiz. Swiftly to other news. Jenson Button, great news. So Jenson Button is not only doing Le Mans now in this Garage 56, this extra entry that the organisers will give to someone that's going to have a future car racing at Le Mans. So he's doing Le Mans with his Chevy Camaro, the next generation NASCAR, sharing with Jimmy Johnson and Mark Rockenfeller. But now he's also said he's going to do 3 real heads-on NASCAR races, 2 road courses. He's out at COTA in 2 weeks' time, and then he's also where Kimi Räikkönen's also on the same grid. So Kimi and Jenson, and then Jenson's also going to do the road course at the Indianapolis road course, and then he's going to do this new Chicago street course. So we've got Button out in 3 NASCAR events plus Le Mans. That's something to look forward to.
Okay, you mentioned Jenson Button. I'll give you a Jenson Button pop quiz. When was his first Grand Prix? What year was his first Grand Prix?
Oh, no idea. I can't remember dates. Okay. No, dates kill me.
I'll tell you now. The reason I'm telling you is because I saw that yesterday was the anniversary of his first ever Grand Prix in 2020. Can you believe that? So, he was, so 2020. There you go. No, it wasn't. It was 2000. 2000. What am I talking about? 2020. You didn't even correct me there.
Well, no, because I wasn't. It was just going straight over the top. Like Crofty's bloody stats. They're just in one ear, out the other. Right, let's move on to last week's action on track, the World Endurance Championship, which is now it's on Friday. By the way, you have to make sure it's Friday. The race at Sebring, the 1,000 miles, opening the World Endurance Championship with the 11 hypercars and going up against the 12 LMPs and the 14 GTs. But it was just fascinating to see them out first time, going head-to-head in a proper time session. One Ferrari didn't make it to the end. James Collado had a big shunt at turn 1, just starting his first flying lap on the Sunday morning. But the Toyota's on top. But it's all very close. It's very encouraging because obviously you're worried about the LMP, the LMH hybrids, the FIA cars, and the LMDH, the Daytona, the IMSA formula. Obviously, they've got to run together. They've got to make this balance of power. But the 2 Toyotas, they were just 0.2 of a second ahead of the first LM Daytona hybrid, the Cadillacs. So just 0.2 separates them. And the Porsches right behind them as well. So Porsche right on the pace, but another half a second back, not quite there. But the first, 5 are covered by a second. 4th best, really, after Toyotas, Cadillacs, Porsche. The Ferraris were 4th best. But they beat the Peugeots. Now, the Peugeots, of course, did 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 races last year with their weird-looking Daytona, proper LM hybrid. the one with no wing at the back. And I've always thought it won't work. I'm still convinced it won't work. It's got a sport. I think it's the ugliest looking thing, where some high-tech boys think this is the most exciting, fantastic looking Batmobile. I just don't think it'll work. But of course, it was the debut for the Ferraris, because they haven't been out yet. So it's great to see Ferraris more or less on pace, although one was binned. It's fascinating what's coming up. And of course, next year we've got BMWs coming in and Lamborghinis and Alpines and all sorts. So this is just half the future.
How about your mate Jim Glickenhaus? How's he getting on?
Well, unfortunately, they were slowest. They were 11th. Even the new Van Wall, which is what's the name of the manufacturer? I always forget one name. Anyway, the Van Wall is out there, which is amazing. This is a car that manufactured the last race in about 1961. So it's a long time back since Van Wall was on a track, and they were quicker than Glickenhaus. And in fact, only half a second slower than the Peugeot. So quite a good, impressive performance by the Van Wall. But Glickenhaus, they were on pole a couple of times last couple of years. So they're 3 seconds off the pace. But
listen to the 6 people I just gave you as pole position in Formula One. So sometimes the statistics don't match what really happens.
Yeah. They very rarely match what really happens.
You love stats, really. Deep down, you love stats.
No. Right, let's move on to the first racing action. Going all the way. We haven't followed the Australian supercars in the past as much as we should have. So I think it is the best touring car formula anywhere in the world. They're just fantastic. And I sort of took some note. This is their new Gen 3 cars, which they've reduced the aero by 30% to get better racing. There you are, you see, reduce aero to get better racing. And they were on the streets of Newcastle, which is an amazing street track. And they had so it's Chevrolets now, Chevrolet Corvettes, not Chevrolet Corvettes, Chevrolet, what's the Chevrolet brand they use? Chevrolet, anyway, Chevrolets against the Mustangs. Camaros against Mustangs. And it was a 1-2 finish for Camaros on the first race. Kiwi Van Gisbergen and against the Aussie Brock Feeney, only 20 years old, his new teammate.
Wow.
So they said first 1-2 ahead of the Fords of Waters and Chas Mostert. But then the front 2 cars that finished first and second were disqualified for cheating. And who do you think those first 2 cars are sponsored by?
I'm not saying anything.
It's fact. You can say what you think. Who do you think the sponsors of the first 2 cars that were disqualified?
Well, it might be a fact, but if I say something and I'm wrong about a very popular energy drink, then I might be. Then people might say that I'm being biased.
You're right. The 2 Red Bull Chevy Camaros were disqualified. I was a crazy cheat, to be honest. I mean, it's just sometimes these regulations. So on these new Gen 3 supercars, they're allowed cool boxes. It's very hot in Australia. All the passengers room with cool boxes. It has to sit in the passenger seat of the car. And in there, they've got dry ice and they can feed them helmets for air. They can feed their suits. But during the race, the Ford boys noticed that the Red Bull team were putting dry ice into the driver's door, drivers on the right. And they're thinking, well, what were they doing? Adding cooling stuff on the right. Anyway, it turns out there's a very good description on the Aussie supercars. They get an engineer, they show a car, show what they're doing. And on the drivers, between the driver and the door pillar, there's a shield to stop their legs going to the right. And then there's an empty area level with the sort of side of the driver, which is all part of the crash zone, crash box. So you're not allowed to put anything in that space because the car should be allowed to crash. But they put an extra cool box between the door and the driver's seat, which therefore took away the safety zone. So it's not a technical advantage. It was simply, apparently most of the drivers were saying it wasn't that hot, but apparently Van Gisbergen thought his feet were getting too hot, so they put this extra box in to feed some cold air into where the pedals are. They're appealing it, obviously. So that was race 1, with all that controversy. Then race 2, Van Gisbergen then came charging. He only qualified 5th or something, and he took the lead in dramatic push, touch and go style, which Aussies are very clear on this. It's not something you're allowed to do, the old shove on the backside. But anyway, there wasn't disqualified or protested. And he actually Cam Waters, he pushed out Chas Mostert, sorry, I get all these names wrong. So he did a bump and run to win the second race. And then at the drivers' conference, Van Gisbergen wouldn't answer any questions because all the Ford people in arms that he'd done the push and shoved and would win the second race. So more controversy, this time for the Red Bull driver's driving standards and his method of overtaking came under question. The journalist in there supposed to do the after-race TV interviews, and Van Gisbergen refused. I'm just saying, great team, and we had a great race. I'm not commentating. He turned away and refused to answer any questions. And the Aussies were really upset. So lots of drama.
Whatever sport it is in the world, however high or low the standard, there's always drama. There's always, but it's mostly forgotten about the next week, isn't it? Unless it's football rivalry, and then it goes on forever. But so should we follow?
Very
it more?
entertaining.
We're
now going to follow it more. Now we've followed the first round. We now know the teams. We now know there's the Ford versus Chevrolet. We know there's lots of grudge match that Chaz Mostert's going to be unhappy that he was nudged out of a win. So yeah, we're going to follow it now. It's going to be good.
Can we go and watch it as well? Can we get somebody to get us to go and watch it? That'd be nice.
Well, we could have got Red Bull, but now you've upset them. Probably not. No.
I was talking about Rich Energy, not Red Bull. I didn't know it was Red Bull. I was talking about Rich Energy.
Oh, right. No, it's just funny. It just happened to be Red Bull, so there it was. It's the 888 team. It's not really Red Bull. It's the 888 team that run the cars. So then we went to NASCAR, which is probably the second best saloon car formula in the world, at Phoenix. But I have to say, it was another boring race. I'm glad you didn't watch that one. It's around this little Phoenix, just over 1 mile oval. Again, new regulations. They've got less aero to help people race better. But in this, I think it shot them in the foot. It was a really hot day, hotter than all the qualifying and testing. And it turned out to be it was just like Formula One. I hate to admit it, because the tyres were going off, and anyone pushed hard, the tyres would go off. And they were trying to do the first section before they had to pit for tyres. They're all trying to conserve tyre. They're all just tyre conserving, running around single file, nobody really racing for about 2 hours or something. Of course, they had the restarts after 2 stages. Anyway, the two Chevrolets that were dominating last win, which of course was William Byron and Carl Larson. Byron stealing the win. Don't you remember last time he stole the win from Carl Larson because they had too many restarts. But so it looked like one of those two would win. They both led half the race pretty much. But then Kevin Harvick in the Ford, who's won this race 10 times, he's retiring this year. So it's Kevin Harvick's last year. He's having an amazing stint. He suddenly got his tyre wear going well and just cruised past the 2 Chevys, was cruising to an amazing win in his final year of racing when someone spun off and the yellows came out. So just as Larson's race was ruined, both races like done 95% of boring racing, and then the last 5 minutes because someone spun off. And the first restart, Carl Larson managed to stay ahead, got ahead of Kevin Harvick. But then the yellows came out again. And on the second restart, William Byron, of course, won it last week, got the jump on Carl Larson and won it again. So Byron won both races, and Larson lost out on both races, and so did Kevin Harvick. So just last-minute drama in the NASCAR, but not the most exciting racing.
You want drama? You want drama? I'll give you drama. Extreme E. You want drama?
There's a more important championship before we get to Extreme E.
Come on, then. You don't want drama, obviously. You want boring. Come on, what are you going to hit me with?
Yeah, maybe the Extreme E was the most. Well, it depends what sort of drama you want. British Rally Championship, much more important than Extreme E. We need to get some more British rally drivers up on the podium. It was a Malcolm Wilson rally up in Cumbria. And it was actually short because of all the snow and weather and all the horrible weather. But there's only 11 cars in the top class, but that's the same as the World Championship. There's only 10 cars, in fact, in the top class in the World Championship. But it was probably sponsored by Malcolm Wilson. There were 7 Fords built in Cumbria by Malcolm Wilson's company, 2 Volkswagen Polos, 1 Skoda Fabia, and 1 Peugeot 208. But just to rub salt through everyone's mood, Malcolm Wilson then employed his World Championship driver, Adrian Formeau, the French guy, to come over and win the rally easily, which was a bit disappointing for the Brits. But it was good for Malcolm Wilson because in second place was Keith Cronin in the Polo, VW Polo. So if he hadn't got his French superstar into the British Rally Championship, he probably wouldn't have won it. But this highlights just to me how we're struggling to get British drivers. I mean, actually, Keith Cronin's an Irish driver. always think, when it comes to rallying, we're all one family, happy family. But poor old Keith Crane, he's now, I don't know, about 36 years old. He's won the British Championship 4 times. You know, he's come back again and beaten all the other British hopefuls. But he can't get a ride in the World Championship, and he never will now. But a great result for him. But in third place, there was a 20-year-old British driver, Elliot Payne, in another Ford Fiesta. So hopefully, maybe Elliot Payne might be a rally name for the future, 20-year-old. And just quickly, while trying to promote British drivers in rallying, in the European Rally Championship last weekend in Portugal, John Armstrong and Andrew Borrell won their class, the GB3 class or RC3 class. Also in a Fiesta, in one of Malcolm Wilson's Fiestas. So it's a good weekend. So we'd like to see John Armstrong.
It's not as sexy, is it, as the single-seater stuff and
sports
cars and Le Mans.
And it's very expensive. Run these rally cars. The backup crew you've got to have to follow you through the forest. But anyway, British Rally Championship is still alive and just about kicking, even if we haven't got a World Championship. But yes, perhaps the most dramatic motors. No, it wasn't as dramatic as Australian supercars.
Well, I was being a little bit sarcastic there as well, because there was one bit that was dramatic. It was just bordering on ridiculous, really. It was the penalty that for speeding in the slow zone, which unionize the pit lane. But it was the most bizarre. Can you explain this? The penalty was 136 seconds, not 120, not 2 minutes, not 130, not 140. 136 seconds. I don't understand. And that was to Rosberg Racing, and which meant Velocity Racing were promoted in the first place. But let's start again, because I'm going
to add to that. Because that's one thing you can't understand. They've simplified for Extreme E this year. Wait for this, right? They've simplified it. So now they don't have straightforward qualifying, right? They have Quali 1, Heat 1, Heat 2, and then Quali 2, Heat 1, Heat 2. And all this is, you get different points for all these Quali 1s, Heat 1s, Heat 2s that eventually get you into the super final. Then you don't get to the super final. There's a redemption race, they call it. Instead of the last chance, whatever. It's a redemption race. And then if anyone ties on points, because you accumulate points that eventually get you through to the final, there's the Continental Traction Challenge, which is one section of the lap, I think. Whoever combined fastest laps, that will be a tie-breaking situation. But anyway, they were all rolling over with wheels in the air. Poor old Katie Munnings was upside down, and so was her teammate in the Andretti car, and they couldn't see anything for half the time because there was sand everywhere. Of course, sadly, Jenny Gow wasn't commentating. Although I criticised Jenny for her non-stop wall-to-wall, but that's what she's told to do. She's had this awful stroke. She was actually in the studio as a photo of her, so still best wishes to Jenny, and tries to recover from that awful stroke she had. But they got the lovely Nikki Shields in to help. I've worked with Nikki. She's fabulous. But obviously, she's been briefed. She's become a Formula E commentator presenter now as well. And she was obviously briefed that you must keep talking as being enthusiastic as possible. And she couldn't quite get as many words per minute in as Jenny had. So she was a little bit, off the pace. But she managed to use phenomenal about 6 times, I think, in the first 2 races. It's phenomenal. I always wonder with these sort of super commentary methods, and everyone now, television, radio shows, everyone's lovely, everyone's brilliant, aren't they? And where do you come phenomenally or brilliantly phenomenal? Where do you go to go higher? Now everything's brilliant. I did like one aspect of the new track. They got a new track limits method in this track they had this time, which was the sea, the Red Sea or the Dead Sea, the Red Sea. So I quite like that. A couple of them actually went into it, which was entertaining. But no, I lost touch with who was leading, who was rolling over.
It's not. Yeah,
it's spectacular. It's spectacular. But the final, when they all get the top ones leveled out, it's quite processional in the end because the dust you couldn't get quick enough. There's very little overtaking towards once the heats were done. But the Saturday winners were Veloci Racing, and the Sunday winners was Carl Sainz's XE team. And there you have it. Actually, do look at YouTube. If you are listening on Spotify, which Paul will put up this week because he didn't last week, the Spotify link is terrible.
It's not me. It's Phil.
Who are we blaming? All right, Phil. Spotify link didn't appear last week. If you are listening on Spotify and not watching on YouTube, do comment. I want to know if anyone is excited by Extreme E. Don't just go with my opinion. Do you watch it? Do you love it? Do you understand
I'm excited
everything?
About Nikki Shields. She's brilliant. I wish I was half the presenter that she is.
Yeah, well, you're not.
But
I'm not trying to pretend you're not. You're not. So that was it. Although there was no big, huge events,
Right.
there was always motorsport around the world to entertain. Always get excited about motorsport. Every weekend there's something exciting. Even if it's
We
not
get
Formula
excited.
One.
Next weekend I'll be excited. Formula One in Saudi Arabia. The widest street track on the circuit.
Have they changed those DRS zones? Because this was the track where they kept on trying to not lead into the corner, wasn't it? To get the DRS for Verstappen and Leclerc, wasn't it? This was the track.
Yeah, exactly.
With about 4 DRS zones. So you didn't actually want to use the DRS because you wanted to use the DRS on the next corner. Yeah, Formula 2 there. No Formula 3 this weekend. Formula 1 and Formula 2 in Saudi. This amazing sports car weekend, which could keep you going. Sebring is 1,000 miles, the World Endurance Championship on the Friday. It's a 1,000-mile race, 8 hours maximum. That's 5 p.m. our time. Friday night, somehow 5 p.m. Then there's the IMSA race, the American Championship, the same weekend on Saturday, the traditional Sebring 12-hour race. So 2 amazing sports car races. But of course, that's not going to happen next. The last time I had this double header. World Rally Championship in Mexico. That's always quite spectacular. Crazy fans. And NASCAR in Atlanta. So yeah, big Sebring and Formula One. Massive weekend of following motorsport and enjoying motorsport.
Enjoy, and see you next week.
See you next week.
Cheers.
My front doorbell just went. I'm rushing to the front door. See you, Paul.
Bye,
Cheers.
mate.
Going to catch the man at the door. Could be something. Who knows?